Baird Country. Okay, welcome everybody. We have an amazing guest today. This is Brooke Whipple of Girl in the Woods YouTube fame. She was also on Alone Season 4 and Alone Season 5 in Mongolia, and on the show Yukon River Run. She's also a published author and an outdoor living, off-grid living expert, I like to call you, and as well as an adventurer. Welcome to the show, Brooke. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much. I'm in very... I need to come to the table very humble because you are the adventurer. You have done so many amazing things, so I want to interview you too at some point.
Well, absolutely. I would be very happy for that, and thank you very much. And you know, you have gotten up to some really awesome stuff, and I just remember reading in your book the how you originally got to Alaska. You essentially grabbed like very few resources. You were in your early 20s, and you more or less just said, I'm going. How did you make that decision? What was that like just to kind of launch yourself into an Alaskan lifestyle?
Oh, Alaska was so on my radar, even from a really young age. And after high school, I ended up getting to go with some family friends. It was the first time I'd ever been on an airplane. And they were going to see their son in the Coast Guard in Homer. And they asked me to go along. I was like, yeah. So I got to go to Alaska and like see the place, right? And it was an amazing week, right? With these really dear family friends. And so I had Alaska in my brain and went off to college, just a local community college right out of high school. And I was literally skipping class to play ping pong.
Cool.
And, you know, that didn't work out so good.
No. Oh, here's me. I'm like, oh, yeah, I mean, that's bad. I mean, don't do that.
Right.
Kids.
I was so uninspired. And so at that moment in college, I was in one of the buildings and I saw this flyer for working in Yellowstone. And I thought, oh, my gosh, how amazing would it be? My whole life wanted to be someplace more wildernessy. So I told my best friend, we're going to go apply to work in Yellowstone National Park. So we did, and we got jobs there. So that was the first time I'd ever left home and went out west and like started to fall in love with like the mountains and the idea of wilderness and like that freedom it felt like to just leave my very small hometown and get that taste of freedom, which led to, after that, lift operator in Vail and wildland firefighter in Montana. But yeah, Alaska was still like this place that I wanted to return. Mm-hmm. And it was just calling me. And I just thought, you know what? I got to go. I didn't have any money. I was renting an apartment at the time in Michigan. And I said, I'm just going to go. Bought a ticket. I had very little money. Bought enough ticket to buy. I got a one-way ticket to Anchorage. And I thought, I'm going to go to Homer, the place where I had visited on that trip with my family friends.
Yeah.
I'm going to Homer because that's the only place I really got to see there. And at least I've been there. So one-way ticket, got to Anchorage. I had $200 to my name, had a backpack and my tent. I didn't have a job. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have no place to live. I was just going to get myself to Alaska.
And you were 22 years old.
Yeah, something like that, yeah. So I landed in the middle of the night and slept in the airport until morning and caught a shuttle to Homer, the place that I had been. And still, I have no plan. I don't know what I'm doing.
Do you know anybody there?
No, didn't know anybody. So as we're getting closer and closer, I'm like, got to figure this out. So I asked the shuttle driver, like, so do you know any cheap place to stay? Like, is there... And he's like, well, there's this bed and breakfast, and they have like a room and a bunk. It's like, you know, for like the traveler, you know, like the hostel type of crowd.
Yeah.
And you can get breakfast, and it's $15. I'm like, take me there.
Yeah.
So he dropped me off at this bed and breakfast, knock on the door. I'm like, you know, can I have a bunk for $15? And she had room. So that got me there. And I had my first meal. And the last cheapest night you'll ever find in Alaska, like $15 for like
Unheard of.
a bed and a breakfast. And then it was like, what do you do from there? And figure it out is what happened. And so I needed a job. And the first thing I could think of is, well, maybe this lady needs some help here. Like I could do anything to help her at the bed and breakfast if I could just like pitch my tent on her property. So I waited a few days, let her get to know me. I paid a couple more nights and ran this idea by her. And reluctantly, I talked her into it. So then I was able to pitch my tent on her property. And I'm like, I will do whatever it takes. I'll clean your bathrooms. I will help with whatever, just if I can have the privilege of being on your property. Use your shower, whatever. So that was good. And so I had a place to live, but I still didn't have an income. I needed a job. So I spent $50 on a bike. And then Homer has this spit that goes out into Kachemak Bay, and there's a lot of businesses and kind of things going on. So I rode my bike down the spit and tried to find a job. And I got a job at the sports shed that sold everything but rockets and mortars for like killing fish, right? So I had a job that paid, I had the wheels, and I had a place to live. So I continued to work at the bed and breakfast for free in exchange for
to be able to camp on the
there.
property.
And then I would ride my bike to work. And I think I had $50 to my name when I got paid the first time.
So you'd spent $150. So how far in were you by the time you finally got a job? Or by the time you got a job?
Less than 2 weeks.
Less than 2 weeks. So what did your family and friends say at the time when you're like, I have $200 in my pocket. I'm going to Alaska. See you later. Did they think you were crazy? Did they think you were, not taking reality into consideration? What kind of things did you hear before you did that?
Yeah, my dad was a police officer at the time, and it really, really affected him. And it's one of those things you're like, well, I'm not a kid.
Right.
I know he's seeing this through the lens of like he's seen all the worst things and the worst people in the world. He was legitimately concerned for me, as I would be as a parent. So I was either like really tough decision. Do I stay and not upset my father, or do I go and I know I have the confidence and the grit to go make anything happen.
Yeah.
And I just decided this is something I needed to do.
Yeah, yeah.
Because it was just on my radar. Alaska was just really, really it's kind of like you grow up with like this legend in your head. And Alaska was always that legend for me. Like, I've got to be like the farthest place I could go in North America and in the States to be like this wilderness last frontier. It really just appealed to me. Like, I have to get to Alaska.
There's something about the North, and after you go once, you somehow get addicted to it. And you see a lot of people, like there was a joke in Canada, like Canada has a new territory called Nunavut. How much do we want to see Nunavut? And I'm just like, I want to see all of it. Like, this is a fascinating, amazing place. And there's all kinds of people, like, I think I'm affected by the same thing. I never moved there permanently, but I remember my first time going up to the Northwest Territories was 18 years ago, and I've pretty much done, spent multiple weeks in the North every year since. People say, oh, that's a good once in a lifetime thing, but I just kind of found a way to get up there and keep doing it. It sounds like kind of that's something you can, you have that sort of that feeling too, that, I don't know, that kind of northern addiction, we'll call it.
Yeah, they say it gets in your blood. But also, it's just the people.
Yeah.
There's so many like-minded people that get drawn to that in the same way. And there's just this energy and this vibrancy of living life to the fullest. It's very appealing to get around those type of people, because a lot of Alaskans are there from other places.
Right.
And they're drawn for the same reasons you are: the independence, the freedom of kind of doing things differently and at your own pace and at your own scale, and like that wilderness. And it's just an incredible pull for, I think, many people. And you surround yourself with those people. It's a very inspiring place to be.
Yeah.
You see people age very actively in the North. Like they just have this gumption about them that's just so inspiring. I don't know. It's a place and a people and it's a feel, and they say it just gets in your blood.
Right, right. And I just love how you were able to sort of see where you could be helpful and then just make that into something that would work for you, right? Like so many people, oh, you have to have a job, but you were kind of, what I'm impressed at that age is you can come up, you can look around and you say, well, this person at this bed and breakfast or at this hostel actually could probably use my help doing A, B, C, and D. Why don't I pitch that in return for this, and just to be able to see that. And I think at the essence, that's sort of really how a lot of people can start out earning that first bit of money or starting their business, whatever it might be on any scale, is just trying to be smart enough to see that somebody has a need for something and just speak up and put yourself there and make something happen. So yeah, I would have been scared too. I don't have a daughter that's 22 years old, but I would imagine I would be nervous too, for sure. But also I would be pretty proud to hear that story. So that's pretty awesome that you managed to do that. But how did it, like, so you started with your trip to Alaska when you were younger, and then you worked fighting forest fires. But go back a little bit more. What was it that sort of sparked your interest to want to live this kind of life of outdoor adventure? I know that you're from, rural Michigan as well. But not everybody that's from, a lot of people, even from here, that they just like the small town lifestyle. They don't want to go camping. They don't want to live in a tent. They don't want this like grand adventure to, you know what I mean? They like to live in town, and that's great. They're not city people, but they're they like what they're doing. What was it that made you want to do these like outdoor adventures? Is there anything that kind of spurred your excitement for that?
It's very much a culture of where I grew up, the hunting, the fishing, the outdoor kind of lifestyle. But even as a little kid, and as far as I can remember, I just wanted to be an adventurer. I just wanted to be building forts and roaming the woods and, very pulled to the books in the library about the Native Americans and how they, lived their life and lived off the land. And it's always just really, really been a pull from the earliest memory. Like, I just wanted to be wild. Like, I wanted to see wild country and just feel that and be there. So, and then in high school, there was a club called the Wilderness Adventure Club. And you can imagine all the most popular kids were in that club, right?
I feel like there's like a nerdier Boy Scout thing in the States than Canada. It's like not as nerdy in Canada to be a Boy Scout as it is in the States.
Yeah, well, this was just a school club. And yeah, exactly. It was definitely not the cool kids. But, I was all about we're going to do something cool outside and maybe go on some trips. Like, yeah, I want to be part of this. So when I was 14, we did a trip to Isle Royale. So we were going to hike from one end of Isle Royale to the next. And that's the island in Lake Superior.
The Eye of the Wolf.
Yeah, it's a national park. I think it's the most remote national park, they say, which as far as like the most isolated to get to. You have to take a boat or a float plane to get there. So hiking from end to end in a 7-day period was my real first like immersion into someplace wild with a backpack and a group of people and camping every night. And I remember just sitting around the fire one night, and you just hear the wolves howling and the fire's going, and that had such an impact on me to hear that in that moment of just like, wow, I want more of this,
Yeah, that wolf cry.
It really does, nothing I'd ever heard. It was special. And you're just like, man, at the time, and even through high school and early college, like I didn't know there was a chance to make a living and do anything regarding that love of the outdoors. Like there's no curriculum, there's no career path, that was ever suggested to me or encouraged to like, well, maybe you should, I thought it would be cool to be like a wildlife biologist. That was about the closest I could think to getting into, and it's like, Oh no,
Or
I
CO.
suck
A
at,
lot of people get it to be a conservation
yeah.
officer.
And I thought about that because my dad was a cop, and it was interesting. I was kind of chasing that for a small while.
Yeah.
Took some college classes, but I suck at math, so wildlife biology was never going to work for me.
Yeah.
And then I was more of this wild spirit. I just kind of,
Call of the wild.
I started just loving gig work.
Yeah.
So when you can go and work a season here, and that's working in Vail as a lift operator, and then working a season as a wildland firefighter, working a season in Yellowstone, and then you get exposed to all these wild places, but you've got a job and an anchor of food and room and board, which kind of gives you the adventure and the pay and get to see a new place for the first time. So I'm really a fan of gig work.
Yeah, yeah. I guess it's not as stable because you don't know what you're going to be able to land one year to the next, but it's also part of the adventure
That's
of it
way
too.
more exciting. Yeah.
So on Ile Royale, okay, that's how we say it in Canada. Ile Royale.
Okay.
Yeah. But anyways, did you ever see the old mines there? Because it's kind of famous. I've never been, but I've heard some cool things and stories of these old like copper mines, the remnants of ancient copper mines on.
No, that's
Royal.
interesting.
No?
No, we just hiked, A to B. It was like every day, 8 to 10 mile kind of thing to get to the other end and catch your boat to go out. So that's interesting. I would love to go back. I was just telling Dave this every spring, the last few years. I'm like, I really want to go like first trip out, right? Because they only run the boat.
Yeah.
I want to be on the first boat. So the first open, because, they close it all winter. You can't get there. And then they open up the boat traffic. You can access the island.
How long of a trek is it? Do you remember?
To get across the water.
To get across the island, backpacking.
Oh, well, I mean, it kind of depends on straight shot. It took us about a week.
Okay.
Going
all right.
like 7
so
to 10 miles.
Pretty major trek then.
Yeah. It was 60 some miles end to end.
Okay. Yeah.
But I would love to go like first out of spring boat, and take my kayak and do like kayaking, because you can do like
circumnavigating.
Well, no, I don't think I want to be on Lake Superior, but there's lots of inland like lake connections, and you just portage
on the
through
island.
some of and it's a less frequented area of the park,
right?
Because it is only boat accessible, and I don't know,
that sounds cool.
Yeah.
That's
And do a solo.
That's a place that's always sort of attracted me, because these ancient
really
mines,
cool.
you hear about the wolves and how they got there, and
Right.
they're like inbred because it's not a very big
Well, they
island
just
apparently.
brought a new pack on that's
Did they?
being established about 3 years ago. So
Okay.
there's a new wild pack being established.
Yeah, they're starting to play banjos. Deliverance. I get Deliverance comments being a canoe. It's like, Jim, you ever hear banjos when you're out there? I'm
That's
like,
a new one. Never heard that one.
yeah, exactly. Right. No, but I do look like Burt Reynolds a little bit.
A little
from
bit.
Here, yeah. That's awesome. So one thing that really kind of jumped out at me is that even before you went up to Alaska all by yourself, and this is before you met your husband, Dave, who we just had on the show here as well.
Yes.
I'll have to remember to put Dave before you now.
Right.
You went to Alaska, but you were a forest fighter. I didn't interrupt you, but you kind of mentioned that you're a forest firefighter in Montana, right?
Yeah.
What was that like?
It was awesome. I just love like hard physical work. There's something just so visceral about beating up your body.
I think anybody that watches your YouTube channel could see that you're not afraid of hard work.
Yeah. I don't know. There's just something I've always been attracted to just hard work. And so first off, to be on a fire crew, you have to pass the test and kind of pass the grade to get onto the team. So there's education, but also there's like the physical tests. And I remember there was one other girl, and we just like smoked every guy there.
Nice.
And of course, so we got on the crew. Yeah. And so it's just kind of like this, I'm very competitive by nature. I want to just beat that person who's just like mixing it up.
So you have to have good cardio,
Yeah.
physical health, good strength. You're
Yeah.
they want to make sure just so you're safe out there and you can pull your weight.
Yeah, because you're all dependent on each other.
Right.
But yeah, it was just, we did a ton of project work, which is just gathering slash into piles after the logging companies come in. So we were an independent contractor for the Forest Service. So when they would run out of crews, they would call my company, which was Grayback Forestry. So I was employed by Grayback Forestry, who would then be a subcontractor.
So did you actually have to put out any fires? Like what?
Yeah. So we
natural forest fires?
Yeah. So we would do a lot of project work. Do that. We'd do project burns.
Okay.
And then the only time I ever got on a private jet was for a fire in California. Well, Northern Oregon. We were right above California, or Southern Oregon. And so, it was really, it was exciting work, and it's really physical and hard. And, you're part of a crew too. So you really kind of, with this close-knit group of people that you're working, sleeping, eating with. And it's just kind of this, I've always been attracted to the military, probably for the same reasons, but you're just in this group of people all kind of going for the same thing, and it's really cool.
It's nice to have that camaraderie, isn't it?
Yeah.
And to do things with a group of people, and you joke together and you laugh together, and you feel like we're definitely tribal people, like as humans. Everybody wants to be part of a tribe. A lot of the time people that start their own tribe aren't necessarily the happiest, you know what I mean? So I can definitely relate to that. So then you met Dave.
Big Dave.
Dave asked me to ask you about him.
Yes, he did.
Yeah,
Big Dave.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so did you inspire Dave to go to Alaska then?
Before I met him, the lead singer of his band, so I worked at a coffee house.
Yeah.
And the lead singer of his band would come in all the time. He's like, "Oh, you've got to meet Dave. Like, he really wants to go to Alaska, and I think you guys would hit it off. Like, you could talk to him about Alaska." I'm like, "Yeah, well, whatever, Yeah. And he did come in and play a gig there, and that's when I finally got to meet him. And I was also in a band at the time, so we also had that in common. So
I saw in your video when you're telling, you have a really cool video on your channel where you sort of tell this backstory, and you're like, "Look at this guy, he's pretty cute." And it was like a picture of Dave just like playing guitar on stage with like no shirt on or something, like in like overalls or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so then our bands would sometimes play gigs together, like at different places. So it was really fun. But so that's how I met him. And then by then I had figured out I could actually go to school for an outdoor job. So I found I could get a degree in outdoor adventure recreation management. So I did end up going back to college to get that degree. And then I had just finished that to go to an internship back to, I guess I was going to Wisconsin, and he was going to Alaska for the first time. So we were going different ways, and so that's how he got to go for the first time. So he went without me and lived in his truck and did all the cool things.
Okay.
Sort of reinventing life that way.
It's cool to hear the story from your perspective as well, because I heard Dave's story, but it's still very different than your own, But I think that's cool. And then so you ended up living with Dave on the Aleutian Islands, and that was before you ended up building a cabin and working with the raft company. But tell me a little bit, because I talked to Dave about the Aleutian Islands, but I wanted to hear it about a little bit from your perspective. What was it that was cool about it? What was it that was not cool about it, if anything? I don't know if there's anything you could share on that.
Well, at the time, we had been married, and we had a gig job. We were caretakers at a campground in Sitka, Alaska, because I had been there before on my internship. So back to Sitka, and our time was running out. And I thought, wow, where could we go now? And there was this thing called Caretaker's Gazette, which I think is still a thing. It's this little publication, and it lists all kinds of like caretaker jobs around the world. Neat. And I had thought, if we could get like a remote like lodge job for the winter somewhere in Alaska, that'd be super cool. Well, I managed to get a copy before it went to print. Like I paid ahead of time so I could be the first one to see the listings for Alaska. And I saw this post for this place at the very tip of the Alaska Peninsula, which would be right across the Aleutian Islands, for this caretaker job. And I'm like, honey, maybe this is super cool sounding. Like we could spend our winter doing that.
Wild, as if that's even a listing that you could look that up, as if it's even published anywhere. Like that's just so cool that you found that.
So we needed to leave Sitka. The season was ending and we're like, oh, let's go do this, and so we ended up doing that for 7 months. And it was just getting dropped off into the middle of, nowhere in this homestead that ran completely off of hydroelectric power, which has systems you're not familiar with. And like you're dealing with the North Atlantic and the Bering Sea running through False Pass in front of us. So if you've ever watched like Deadliest Catch, they have shown shots of those, the boats going through False Pass, which would have been right in front of our homestead on the way to the Bering Sea for the crab fishery.
Yeah.
It's funny, before that was a thing, I remember seeing boats. And I'm like, now I look it back, those were probably...
You should have been like, Dave, maybe we should make a show out of these boats. You would have been...
exactly. Yeah. And so there we were, like, figuring out life as, we hadn't been married very long, year and a half maybe. And
me and Tori, you got married on a beach in Jamaica.
Yeah.
So me and Tori got engaged in Jamaica.
It was amazing. Do you remember where you were?
Yeah, we were in a place called Runaway Bay, like a nice resort.
That's where we were.
Really? Get out of here.
Yeah.
Oh, so cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah. No, so we never actually got married there.
But still.
But it was right after season 4 of Alone.
Oh yeah.
And I took off to Alone, and no spoilers, but me and my brother won. I think
pretty much.
That. Yeah. And so I said, well, this is one of the reasons I stuck it out so long there, so I could propose to Tori and I could get my life going, because I was a little behind on my life plan at that point.
Listen, we all are.
Yeah.
I'm still trying.
Yeah. No kidding, eh? Yeah, no, I was.
That is so cool.
It was really special, though. I learned that. I remember hearing that from you, but as I was doing, a little bit of research before you're on the podcast, right? I saw that, and I don't know. I just found it to be touching that you went to Jamaica and that I could relate to that in some essence.
It was. We didn't want the big traditional wedding, and we didn't invite anybody, but everybody knew. But we're like, we're just gonna go do this, and and. That's it.
Yeah.
No big wedding.
That is so cool. And then you ended up working on a raft in Alaska, though, right? So you did the Aleutian Islands, and so that's where you ended up doing your first, like well before Alone, you ended up doing your first sort of TV gig after working for a certain period of time on a raft floating in the Yukon River. How did you get that, and what was that like? It seemed pretty cool.
So after we got out of the Aleutians, it was a bit of a shock. I mean, we were just so isolated for so long, and it was much easier on me than it was Dave. Dave was going absolutely crazy.
Why, just to be kind of so alone and sort of cast away?
It was that everything you wanted to do was like on hold. You're just like you were like a bookmark in your story, right? You were just stuck. Stuck is just the word I'm using. We were needed to be there until spring, right?
Yes.
So if you're coming up with any ideas or any plans or anything you want to do, you're just bookmarking until you can leave. Right. And so there came a point where it was really driving him crazy. I had a better time of it. Like, I would do a gig like that again, but not in the Aleutian Islands.
Right.
Where it was a little tougher on him. He was just really ready to like get going. Right. And he couldn't. Right, so you were just kind of stuck. But honestly, it
was a long time.
It was a long time.
Yeah, months and months.
Yeah, and everything out there is just waiting to kill you as far as like, if you get in the boat, it's just a roll of the dice. If something would happen, we would be instantly dead. Yeah. Like, there's no playing around. Nobody has boats in the water. Nobody is coming to rescue you. Like, you're really isolated. Yeah. So it was really awesome because we actually got to turn the turn of the century there. Like, it turned into 2000 there. Everyone was worried about Y2K, and like, we're playing Yahtzee for 12 hours straight, right? Like,
Yeah.
And because of how the time clock around the world goes,
Yeah.
you know, the end of the Aleutian chain is the end of the day's time clock. So we
Right.
were one of the very last people
The international
on the
date
world to
barrier.
turn into 2000. So it was really pretty cool
That's
to
wild.
think back of like where were you in 2000? We were playing Yahtzee.
Playing
for
Yahtzee
12
near
hours
at the edge of
straight.
the Aleutian Islands, and I remember seeing some pictures. There's no trees.
No.
It's very windswept.
It's like volcanic looking almost. Like there's these massive mountains.
Well, it's
and
in
just,
part of the Ring of Fire, wouldn't
yeah,
it be?
yeah.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
an inspiring, awe-inspiring, like stark landscape that you just, it's immense and beautiful and will just swallow you alive. Like it's just,
Right.
it's like we would get in the boat and like, I remember seeing a sea lion the size of our skiff because we had a 17-foot skiff and like that thing came up beside the boat and it's as big as the boat.
Wow.
And the killer whales riding along with us is, you know, if you go to town for that $17 jar of peanut butter from the village, you know, store and like insane. It was amazing. You know, and you're like, oh, that was the very first time I ever picked up a camera.
Yeah.
There was a video camera there from the people. It was the very first time I decided to start filming things. So it's kind of like my origin story of a filmmaker. Like I put in some VHSs. I would send letters to my family, like, can you send me some blank VHS tapes? And I started recording some of the stuff we were doing there, recording the place. And like, it's interesting to look back at that. Like, oh, that's kind of like where I started, you know?
Have your videography skills or filmmaking skills improved since then, I imagine?
So hope so.
It's so funny. I look back at my
Yeah.
old stuff. I'm like, have you heard of a tripod? You know, like I'm just
Right.
like, what exactly is your plan here, Jim? Like, you know, looking
Yeah.
at some of my old
I
footage, it's just
know.
like this or zoomed.
Stop
or,
zooming.
yeah, or whatever, right? Yeah,
Yeah, well, it's very grainy. It was VHS. But anyway,
Yeah.
so we got out of there. It was a little bit of a sticker shock. And we're like, well, what do we do now? You know, so you're trying to reinvent yourself. Yeah, again, I think that's when we bought our first piece of property.
Yes, and
Started working on the cabin. And then you know, newspaper classifieds were still a thing, you know?
not anymore.
No, not anymore. It's kind of sad. It was kind of nostalgic to go, you know, get the first Sunday paper and see everything that's for sale and see the jobs. And
Yeah,
there was a guy, you know, there was an ad for like guide on a log raft on the Yukon River. And like, what?
and did you already start building this remote? I mean, you were kind of not off grid in that you were able to connect to power, but you know you're living in a 12 by 12 log cabin. Was this happening while you were building the cabin, or was this after you finished building it?
No, we were in the process of building still,
Okay.
I believe. It's hard to think back that far. But, you know, you only do what you can afford.
Right.
So we couldn't afford to hook up to power.
Right.
Even though
yeah.
you could.
Yeah.
We were just bootstrapping everything.
Nice.
And so anyway, I met Neil and he hired me to be a guide on, you know, what he said was this basically 60 by 40 foot log raft sitting on the Yukon River right now. Like, and I'm like, yeah, I want to do that. Absolutely. Cool. So what he would do is, you know, there's these 3 like tents people could stay in. Like it basically is a floating lodge, right? So 3 wall tents for guests, 2 and guide tents on the end, just small little things, a big kitchen guest tent, you know, like where we'd all eat.
Yeah.
And that would just go down river for.
Did it have a motor on it?
Yeah. So there was 2 skiffs at the back of the raft. So if you can imagine your rudder of your skiff, so they were kind of locked in place.
So just sort of like a tugboat
pivot. Yeah.
pushes a barge
Yeah.
out, kind of drives into the barge.
Yeah, so you can kind of at least pivot the raft because obviously the Yukon is a silty river and you can't see sand.
any
You have to learn how to
rocks
read the river. The sand is always.
So that's how you would get back up then too.
So we never go up back up.
Oh no.
No, it's a one-way trip for that raft.
Okay.
So the people would come and fly in and spend a week with us. We'd float like maybe to the next village or in between villages and skiff them to the next village, and they would fly out and we'd get new people in. So I I would run like we would both run a skiff and take people fishing up the tributaries. I was doing cooking, like it was whatever. But I remember flying into Rampart on the Yukon River for the first time, and that plane banking over that raft, and I was just like, you have got to be freaking kidding. I'm pinching myself.
It's
like,
huge.
This is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. Like, Neil Eklund is just like a pioneer of, like, he's a Alaskan sourdough. Like, guy's such a badass.
Yeah.
The stuff he's done is like legend. It's like nobody does that kind of stuff anymore, the stuff he's done in Alaska. But, he's the only guy in the world building giant log rafts and going down a river, like, the old style. But I mean, not old style, like decked out. We had art, he had art and like scrimshaw, and like it was beautiful.
How did he build this thing? So was it multiple layers of logs piled on top of each other and lashed together? Or were there just single huge trees?
Yeah, so to build is just going upriver and finding all kinds of
So you had to rebuild
logs.
this raft again and again?
No, so once the raft is built, it takes a one-way trip, and then everything is sold at wherever you end up, like a village. Like somebody will buy that raft. A lot of times they'll buy stuff like the wall tents. You think about the economy of the Yukon River, like everything has to come to you by air or by the barge on the river. So everything is a commodity able to be sold if you don't want to deal with it. Otherwise, if you want to get back to the bridge, you're going to have to take so everything else, the skiffs and everything that you want to take back, the raft gets sold for firewood or whatever. Yeah. Everything else takes a many, 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 many hour trip back to the bridge where you can access it by road.
Yeah. So when you're going down river, you're meeting different groups of people in different villages.
Yeah.
And then they'll stay as you slowly make your way to the next village. Then you'll meet another group there.
And
then you go and meet your next. Right. So you're doing multiple groups as you make your way down.
Yes.
Oh, so you got to go all the way down the Yukon River and do this whole thing.
Well, we do a section. So it's usually from like the bridge to Galena is about 300 some miles. So you can get quite a few sections out of that.
Yeah.
And then past Galena, the river, it's not as pretty. It gets wider. It just kind of flattens out. And it's just not, the real golden part is that section that we would do from the bridge so that's off the Dalton Highway. Okay. The bridge to Galena, which is a village. And then we'd fly out. They'd fly out. People buy your stuff. You boat everything back to the bridge.
And then he'd rebuild the raft every year.
And so, that would be like... that's the idea. He ended up getting cancer and had to not do that anymore. Yeah. So we had, it was just like an ongoing thing. Like, let's do the raft again and get the business going. Because he survived cancer. Okay. Like, so for several years, it was just like, and then I had kids and like, it's, it's hard to do stuff and be away and like with kids.
Yeah.
Like I would have to be away and like, do that job.
So the first year when you did it, you didn't have kids yet, right?
No, right.
Yeah. And then but then you're going away and traveling and working on a raft. It's hard to hang out with the fam too, right?
Work.
So didn't you get a show though? Yukon River Runners materialized out of this?
Yeah. So then like all these years later, somebody contacted Neil about doing a show. And of course that's just always... He's a dreamer. I'm a dreamer. Like we never stopped talking about the raft and doing that business again. And so he's like called us like, you guys want to do it too. And, now this time it's like the family is going to build this raft together. His son, Dave, and our kids. So we were part of that show where we did actually build the raft again and do that trip again.
Okay. So were you actually guiding tourists on this, Sean, or you just did it for the show?
Yeah, just the show and like showing the aspect of how that looks and how you could basically run the raft as commerce down the river, doing the trading and how that all works. You can load up firewood and sell firewood, to village people because everyone needs firewood, right? And the only way to get it is driftwood. Right. And so there's that aspect of it.
Did you build a lot of the raft out of driftwood as well? Or?
Yeah, the whole raft is all just wood that comes down the river after breakup and just sits on the bank.
Yeah, cool.
And so you're looking for the good straight logs. And so, no, they're spiked together. They're just a couple layers, just a couple layers of like corner and like, overlapping logs.
Yeah.
And then you build a deck on top of that. So you got to pick logs that are, not green, You're
Right.
trying to get the best high and dry logs that are straight and, you
that
spike
aren't too
them.
waterlogged.
Yeah. So you're actually in the river spiking the logs together in the Yukon River.
So it's a
And you
major
can
process to build
Yeah.
this. So did you build the raft on the show?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
So you kind of build it so it's like this, and then you go, "Whoa," and then it forms a square. You know what I mean? And then
using the current?
or just it's just easier to spike everything together, and then you just
Yeah.
kind of straighten it out, and then you start putting on the
Neat.
top.
neat.
Anyway,
I have
it's
to. Where,
fascinating.
can you find that show still? Or
Probably.
yeah.
I don't
Everything's
know.
somewhere nowadays.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Online on some streaming platform
Yeah.
or something like that. Because I want to watch that now.
Yeah, and
Why
then-
haven't I watched that?
And then they got a couple other groups of people together to kind of do that with us, and I don't really understand why they did that. Like, it's a TV show, so they're trying
they
to
tried to
create
hype it,
drama
right.
and like do the things that you probably wouldn't do normally. But
Yeah.
the authentic story is Neil in this, in how he would legitimately do these rafts, either just for his own pleasure, or to take guests down. He just invited me the other day, like, building a raft this fall. We're going to do the Tanana to the Yukon if you want to go.
Cool.
And he's 76.
So he's more or less just doing this for the enjoyment
Adventure
of
and
the
just, like,
adventure of it.
Yeah, because he's just been doing this for so
And does he
long.
put a wall tent on
Yeah.
it still?
Oh,
And
yeah. The
that's
whole thing.
so cool.
You
Yeah.
steer it with the skiffs and...
Is there a
Yeah.
fair amount of people that travel the Yukon River like that in
No.
Alaska?
No, nobody.
Because I feel like at one time maybe it was like in the Huck Finn days,
Well, the gold
down
rush.
in the Mississippi. Yeah, the gold rush and
yeah.
yeah.
That was more upriver.
Right, or you hear the Mississippi raftsmen that would
So
run
awesome.
timber from
Yeah.
the St. Croix or St. Croix or whatever,
Yes.
and these huge rafts, and they'd make all the way down to St. Louis to the mills and get that.
Could you
you know.
imagine seeing that? It'd be so freaking cool.
No, it'd be wild. And I've also just like, there was other boats even at that time, like river gambling paddle wheelers coming
I
up.
know.
Imagine some obstructions.
What a time.
Yeah.
What
Should
a
have been
wild
born in those
time.
days.
Yeah,
eh?
what a wild time.
Yeah.
So that's a very romantic like vision, but like it was a real, like I got to taste that, and it was just
Yeah.
like the most incredible summer of my life. Like I just couldn't believe that, that was happening. It was so powerful.
What kind of fish were you fishing for? Pike mostly, or
Yeah, pike and sheefish. It's just amazing fishing in the tributaries.
some giant pike, right?
Yeah, massive.
Is that
Just
where
so
you
fun.
learned to really like? Because I know pike is like your favorite.
Yeah, I do.
What do you think about the bones in the pike? Do you find them to be bony?
No, you can just
Do you think
fillet
people,
around them.
Do you think people need to just tough it out a little bit more when it comes to bones and pike?
for sure. But they taste so good. And then
Yeah.
I've had people from maybe southern areas say, "Oh, pike, it's disgusting. They
Yeah.
taste like dirt." And it's like, so I've heard that the taste of them really depends on, if they're in colder water, they taste much
Yeah.
better. Some people just like hate pike.
Well, I mean, I've had a walleye or pickerel in a back country, which are supposed to be the best tasting fish, in a smaller, swampier lake, and then portage into a big, deep, clear, cold lake in the spring, and then caught a pike, and the pike tasted better than the walleye. Because, it's just in a cold, clear, big lake as opposed to a swampy lake. So, yeah, I suppose that's true, right? Like, I know a lake where some stupid people stalked, it's like a natural speckled trout cold water lake, and some people stalked largemouth bass in it. Yeah, and just ruined it. But like those largemouth bass taste like pretty good because it's not a swampy lake at all. They sure
Right.
don't taste like brook trout, but
Yeah.
they don't
Yeah.
taste bad at all. So that's kind of cool. When was it? So, I mean, this is just so many cool experiences that you've had here. It's just so neat. But I remember, well, I guess what I'm interested to hear too is, when was it like, okay, because I know that once you had kids, you built two different houses, right? Like you built your full house using logs to a large extent in Alaska. But at what point was it did it become something where got into, buying sort of rural real estate? Because one of the things that, I've talked to you about and I see on your YouTube channel is you talk about how you like to, buy a remote property and develop it. But I just see it from such an interesting standpoint, from like this rural kind of homesteading, off-grid life, out in nature standpoint, as opposed to what a lot of people think of as a real estate investor. Is definitely, you're not the first thing that pops into my mind when I think real estate investor, developer, right? Because and I just love this sort of grassroots, organic way that you go about it, and into some of these places that probably some people wouldn't be so interested in buying. What is it about the feeling behind kind of developing a remote property like this that really you love, or that speaks to you?
Well, I think it really goes back to when Dave and I were starting out together. I mean, we had no money. So when you're wanting that kind of a life, you're looking for pieces of property you can afford, which aren't many.
Right.
You're looking at the bottom of the barrel of stuff that's already been passed over for one reason or another. And that's the kind of stuff we could afford. And so that was our first purchase, was a piece of land that somebody had started something on. We call it kind of the land of broken dreams. This piece of the land we seem to buy all the time and be attracted to are these pieces that have a ton of potential,
right,
but you have to see past the broken dreams that are already there. And which in this case, our first property was, somebody had horses or animals. There's old broken down like fencing and like some little shelters, and like the land was just okay, but like whatever. It's like we could afford that. We can see potential there.
Right.
And I think that really sums up over all of these years the ability or the want to put in the work and the ability to see potential. And those two things really go together. And so our first piece of land was just that. The power company had come down the road and cut a bunch of trees. So there was some downed logs that did belong to us. It was on our property. Like, well, there's enough there for like a 12 by 12 cabin, and that doesn't cost us anything because those are our logs. We had to, find a few more for the cabin, but it would make a 12 by 12 cabin. Like, you build that with your own hands. You put down some Typar and bring in a little bit of gravel. That costs a little bit of money. Now we've got a driveway. You clean up the mud pit and, take down the fencing and clean the place up. And you've got a cute little place for cheap that you did with all just sweat equity. Yeah. And so you just kind of start to build that philosophy, and those dreams keep blossoming from there. It's like, well, okay, now we've got a baby. The 12 by 12 is, we were sleeping in the loft with Belle. It's a one-room cabin. Yeah. We did have electricity hooked up at that point, but still no running water. Like, we're on permafrost. And so build a little bit bigger cabin on that same piece of property. So then you start the process all over and build a little bit bigger piece.
How big of a parcel or piece of land was it?
It was about 2.5 acres. And then we bought, I think, the 2.5 acres next to us.
Did you ever hear anybody
time.
like, oh, you shouldn't? Now, that's a good size, but it was. Do you ever hear people like, oh, you shouldn't have a kid and live in a 12 by 12 cabin? Or was anybody saying anything like that? Like,
I just think people probably wouldn't do that themselves. I don't think it surprised anybody that we lived that kind of. Right. Because we had already done so much already that was kind of out of the box.
I would love to say that when I was a kid, I lived in a cabin in Alaska. I would love to go and brag about that. Yeah. And it's just cool that you gave that to her, to your kid. Yeah. Most people might not want that, but when you're talking to me, I'm like, go all, you know what I mean? I'm just like, it's amazing.
But just that philosophy kind of propelled us to keep doing that. So then when it came time to sell that, we just wanted to move to a different area, like Delta Junction. So it's like, well, you sell that and all that sweat equity comes back. So we took that equity out of that, which is now all cash.
Yes.
Sold that piece of land. And then we kept one little piece of land right there, which Dave ended up then building a spec house on. and sold that. We never did live in that.
And the spec house is just a house you build to sell.
Just built to sell. And that was not log. It was a stick frame house. But we were already in Delta at that point. So he kept a little piece of that land just to build a spec house and give us more. So anyway, we take that equity, buy another broken piece of land dream.
Yeah.
So this piece we found 5 acres for $12,000 that had an old garage still standing, an old house. It was just junk everywhere. I mean, it was a disaster, but it's like, nice land.
Yeah.
Clean this up. You start burning down buildings. You start cleaning out, bringing in truckloads, taking out truckloads of junk. And in the meantime, we have our
Good old
second
Alaska,
baby.
You're still allowed to burn down buildings.
Yes.
Here you'd be like,
Yes.
oh, no, like, can't do that anymore.
By then we have Mickey.
Not to say it never accidentally happens, but yeah.
Right. So we have our son by then. We were living in a 12-foot camper.
Yeah.
And building and cleaning up a piece of land again to start all over. But we got all this cash now, so we can do everything in cash. We always have done everything in cash, but now we've got at least a little bit more cash. So start with a garage, build the garage. Dave went through a big sickness during that time, which put us back a couple years.
Those must have been scary.
It was really awful. And then we were building a log home at the same time. So we live in the garage for a couple years until we get the log home done. And it's just all out of pocket. And again, you take that.
So this is essentially your job, though, at the time, though, right?
Well, no. We're working off site.
So you're still Dave's still doing concrete pouring. You're doing other things as well?
A little bit. He was so sick he really didn't work for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And I was working at Fort Greely, the Army base in Delta. You're just scraping by.
Okay.
Kids were young, and you're just
so you
really
weren't able to just go full time on building.
No, and he
Right.
was sick, and so it was a very uncertain time.
I'm listening to this and I'm just like, that's scary with that whole thing. But it's almost like, the fact that you couldn't afford to do this, or you couldn't afford to put a down payment on a big house, in a way made it so that you were able to go in and pay cash and not have a big mortgage. And to me, I kind of see it as like, it kind of forced you to get some fulfillment out of that sweat equity. I mean, I'm sure at the time it didn't always feel amazing, but just for you and to going, and I start seeing what you're saying, this sort of building or developing a property. You have it and there's trash cabins you're burning, and you start to mold it into a place that's livable, that's nice, that feels like home, that feels familiar to you. And that you're doing it with your own two hands. And, so to me, I hear what you're saying, that even though, it almost is better because you didn't have those big bucks going into it, because you were like, look at what we built and we created, that is more fulfilling than if you did have those big bucks. And really, would you say, I heard you say that in one of your videos, something about something about fulfillment and hard work. Do you think those two things go hand in hand when it comes to something like creating this property that might be hard to see what it could be, but having a vision and really getting out there and working on it and developing something that's pretty amazing?
Yeah, I think we also didn't even ever entertain debt.
Right.
I think that's such an important part of the equation.
Yeah.
Which also makes you sign up for a fair amount of suffering. Because if you are just so there was never a discussion,
right,
a question of going into debt.
Yeah.
So that forces you to have that efficiency of your choice of land, that efficiency of your work and how you perform your work, and what you decide to get done. because it's all going to be under your own power. You're not going to hire out anything. You're not going to get a debt. You're
Right.
not going to go into debt. But there is this other side of like, there's going to be a fair amount of suffering.
Right.
And you have to be okay to be signed up for that right from the beginning.
Yeah.
And so, like, there was never a plan B. It was always, this is just how we do it.
Yes. Yes.
The hardest way possible. But at the time, you're like, this is just our option.
Yeah. How do you think that makes you feel more free?
It makes a world of difference about being free. Like, you're a slave to the lender. The borrower is a slave to the lender. Like,
Right.
you can't ignore that part of freedom, of feeling free, of feeling just a relief. And any amount of suffering is worth not being a slave to the lender.
Right.
And so also there's just that feeling of that you can do things yourself and you can figure it out. And you're doing a very unconventional way of thinking. Like, not a ton of people think that way, or they haven't given themselves permission to think that way. Like, you know, we don't have to have everything right now.
Yeah.
It'll come in time with hard work.
I just love the way that you almost redefine some of these things for me, right? Because you hear, oh, there's good debt, or there's bad debt, but you come into it saying like, I want to be able to have the freedom where I'm not so forced to do A, B, C, and D, or I lose all my land, right? Where somebody might say, oh, it's good to have a big debt because you can then take out equity and buy another place. But the way you're coming into it it just seems like a very kind of grassroots way that, yeah, you have to do all this work. It's hard, but you really have something that's really yours. I don't know if that makes any sense, if I articulated that well, but
yeah, for sure. I think at the end of the day, our philosophy has always been, we are chasing freedom.
Right.
And when you owe a lot of money, you are giving up your freedom. Like, we have the freedom of our time, we have the freedom of our energy, and we get to choose where to put the money that we already have. How do we make that money work for us?
Right.
Instead of how do we have to go out and make money to pay for what we already have? Like, it's a backwards transaction.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. I like that philosophy, because that's how so much of it's paid. Like, take the money in and work for that money, as opposed to, don't
work with the money you already have.
You already have. Thank you.
Yeah.
But it brings you down some pretty interesting paths too with some of these places. And I know obviously now that you have the opportunity to kind of film some of these cool area remote properties that you buy for YouTube, which I'm sure is part of the equation. But you come up to some pretty interesting places that a lot of people would pass through. For example, the one with the tree on it that's in Michigan, just a tree falling through. It looks like nobody had been there for 20 years. And then the one that I think was more recent, this like bunker for some prepper had this cement bunker in the Alaskan bush that you bought sight unseen. Yes. That was pretty interesting. Yes. Man. Can you tell me a bit more about that? I was worried you guys were going to find something like a dead body in there. Yeah.
It was awful.
Yeah.
Well, again, it goes back to what property has been passed over and why.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know why I'm so attracted to like the worst property. Like, why are these properties passed over? Like, I need to go take a closer look, because they're gems. They're like just waiting to be discovered, because there's problems that I can fix, or I can overlook, or I can solve, or I can make benefit me in some way. So I don't know. There's just something so attractive about these trash properties.
Right.
But really, they're not trash. They're just trashed by somebody else.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
And
gorgeous places.
And so you really have to have this eye of not only, I don't know if it's being cheap, but it's really not. It's just like, you want to bargain. You want to like flip your money and make this place, like, I don't know. There is something so attractive to me about cleaning up a place and like making it like, oh, you think this is junk? Wait till I'm done with it.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to be amazing.
It's
going to be amazing. So we see these properties as potential. It's always potential. Yeah. And also there's this vibe of energy to a place. Like, I can go see a place and know right away, like, no. And Dave can too. Like, I don't like it.
Right.
I don't like it. And then if you keep going back, you're like, oh, okay. And then if you find yourself going back again to look at it again, you're like, And then you go back again, you're like, okay, come on.
Right.
Like, I keep going back to take more looks at this place. Or there might be one that's just like, oh my gosh, this is amazing right off the gate.
Right.
Like, there's those too. And usually those are too expensive.
Right. Funny how that works.
Yeah, isn't that funny how that
Once
works?
in a while you get
Yeah.
lucky, and that's usually because the realtor took really bad photos.
And that is what happened
Yeah.
on one of our properties. That is our favorite property. Like, it was just so misrepresented. And it was
Right.
so far out in the bush that you had to go investigate it yourself and evaluate it, which is always the case. Not always, because we have bought two like sight unseen properties.
That's
so like
awesome.
it does work out either way. But you have to kind of know the area also if you're doing something sight unseen, and you already kind of know what you're getting into. Like the
Right.
land around it, you kind of know or whatever. But
Yeah.
or if it's so cheap, it just doesn't even matter. Like
Right.
you can just take a chance.
I remember a date when you're cleaning out this bunker that some prepper lived in. Why didn't the roof had caved in? You're going to build a concrete structure, but your roof's going to be a POS?
Oh, it was.
You know, why wouldn't you put in a better roof?
I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe he thought he wouldn't be there. I don't know. It was bizarre.
Maybe he ran
It's a
out of money
bizarre
because he
build.
spent all his money on concrete.
It was the
And then
craziest build.
it was nuts. And then I saw Dave was like, here's the table of all the treasures we're going to find. And it was like
was nothing.
4 things. Like, it's a short tour. That was awesome.
Right.
I love that. That's so fun.
Yeah.
You
I
know?
don't know. There's just, we lived without running water for 10 years.
Yeah.
And that just,
For 10 solid years. No
Yeah.
Where did you get your water from? Did you
So-
truck it in? Is there a river?
different places depending on where we lived.
Did you have a water tower in the summer?
No.
Okay,
No. It was always just hauling water. We would go, and we lived in north of Fairbanks. We would go to the Fox Spring, and it's just kind of like a place where people get this natural flowing water, and tons of people get water there. And when we lived in Delta, we were near just kind of like a little state park pull-off that had a spigot.
Yeah.
And we would just haul it
I love
5
those.
gallons
We get
at
our
a
water
time.
from a natural spring too. I don't know what it is. It's just the best.
Oh, that's so wonderful.
Yeah, I think it makes you live longer.
Yeah. So 5 gallons at a time for 10 years. Like never had a
cool.
holding tank or, our kids remember like sitting in the bathtub in our bathroom, which neither of those things, like it was just a room with a bathtub and a drain that went outside. And then I would put like a Rubbermaid tote in the bathtub and then pour hot water in there, stick the kids in the Rubbermaid tote.
Right.
That's how they got clean.
Looking back where your kids are like, that was crazy, Mom. Like, how did you do that? Do they reflect
They
on it
do
now?
remember the no water thing.
Yeah.
I think they love that part of their story.
I bet.
To a
Do
little
they?
extent.
Good. Cool.
Now that they're getting older, I think they
Yeah.
appreciate it more. At the time, it was just how we lived, and it was hard. But it's. I think they look back now and think that's kind of neat. They do love that they were born in Alaska.
I bet.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you could kind of give that to them, because I bet
Yeah.
you kind of wish you
I
were too,
do.
right?
I do.
Well, you can't ever be, but you can give that to your kids,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Yeah, no, that's so awesome. And I'm kind of one of those people that I don't like change. Like when I was a kid at our camp, or cottage as they're called around here, we didn't have electricity. We didn't have a phone. We were on a CB. And slowly as we
Wow.
got more and more of these things, I was like, no, like I didn't want these things, right? I like
that's
to.
interesting. As a kid, you didn't want
I
that.
didn't. No, I didn't
Because
at
it was
all.
preserving that moment
Right.
that you've had there before.
Yeah, I didn't like
Yeah.
that to be, I wanted it to stay the same. And then we built it bigger, and we built this and that. But yeah, no, there's something about that I like. And I honestly found people got along better when we were on a CB. Then everybody went to phones because everybody had a different handle.
Oh,
so we had a
right.
CB. So if you wanted to talk, everybody had a handle. If you wanted to talk
Interesting.
to somebody, you'd
That's
be
so
like,
fun.
oh, calling the Bear, or calling Rockwell Island, or calling Bedlam Point, or whatever. And then you'd be like, switch to 22. Then you'd switch so you could have some privacy. Of course,
Right.
anyone could switch
Switch
today.
to 22.
But then everyone kind of knew each other. And if there's someone who had a fire, you could get on the blower and be like, there's a fire at, such and Mackey Bay. And, everybody would go there, right? But then we got on the phones, and then people stopped connecting like that. And then people would kind of fight. And then finally, at the end, there was like cell service. And then people were like arguing on Facebook. You know what I mean? It's just like, there goes the neighborhood, right?
Does your family still have that?
No, they sold it not too long ago, actually. My parents sold the place, but which was sad. But, they were eventually kind of operating as just a rental place for a long time. So it was like this childhood place where I grew up. It wasn't so devastating that it sold, but still kind of sad. I really loved the area.
Great memories though, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. No, I love that kind of thing.
And your dad had built that, right?
He did. So my dad and my grandfather built that place in 1968.
Wow.
So, we're talking about they could a time where they could buy the land, water access, no
Right.
power, you got to clear the timber, use what you can, and then get all the motor out there when they had a 10-horse steel boat, right? And my dad paddled there whenever he could with a canoe full of lumber. I still have his canoe here. He bought it when he
No
was 16.
kidding.
He's
That's
60,
awesome.
74 now.
That's
So,
awesome.
Yeah. So that was a pretty neat place to grow up. And of course, that at that time you could buy the lot for $600.
Right.
And
Can you even imagine?
yeah. Like times has drastically changed.
And that is why I'm constantly telling my husband,
yeah.
I can buy more real estate.
Well, you know what? It's so true.
Because
It's
it
such
is
a
just
good
a gold
thing.
mine.
Yeah, and then
Just
you
hang
build
on to
these
it.
cool things on it. So you, so you buy the real estate. You build these really nice cabins that aren't breaking the bank. They're basic.
No.
And part of what's interesting about what you do too is you're like, we're going to build a cabin that you can do too, right? So it's something that your average kind of Joe who says, I want to maybe buy a remote property, do something like this. You can watch it and be like, I think I can do that. I think that's something that I can handle. So it's very approachable, but at the same time, so you're getting cool YouTube content, but you're also building a functional cabin that you can use, or it'll increase the value of your property when you sell it. So it's really neat how you've managed to like mesh these things together and make them into like a really big, cool thing. But I guess it comes from your love of cabins. Was it only out of necessity that something drew you to cabins, and that you still want to build cabins and these smaller size places? Or is there something that kind of speaks to you about having a cabin in the bush or in a more remote area that really draws you to it? Or even some of the really cool A-frame, like these smaller structures. What is it about that and the lifestyle that attracts you to that sort of resonates with you?
It's just a grown-up version of forts.
That would be bushcraft, I thought.
Oh yeah, I'm just a kid at heart, and like learning to build my own stuff was just like lighting a match on, like lighting the inferno. Like, I don't know, I'm such a romantic, like this cabin in the woods that evokes a feeling and emotion, and like as a filmmaker, that just conveys through film. And
Is
so,
it like a Jack London type of thing, like like a Call of the Wild type of thing?
you just that cabin in the woods, like I know you can relate. Like any person that just loves the outdoors and loves the wilderness can just say, the cabin in the woods is just like the epitome of that dream, right?
Yes.
And so you take all those things and marry it with like this interest in land development in this very DIY, no heavy equipment, very low-key way of development, which is just all really hard labor.
And also respect, all sweat equity.
Yeah.
But also you're disturbing that, you're going about it. You're not completely building huge, retaining walls with large rectangular pyramid kind of blocks and disrupting it. You're leaving the natural beauty of it and making it more useful to you and I guess learning it, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, we just hate that vision of buying a lot. This is just what happens.
Yeah.
You buy the lot, here comes the heavy equipment, clears out this entire like swath.
Right.
Lays down this giant ass gravel pad.
Right.
And there comes this big McMansion. And you're like, wow, that piece of land just got destroyed.
Right.
It's just not how we choose to do it. There's nothing wrong with that if that's what you want. But I just feel like And Dave has always said this, you want this place to look like it's always been there. Like it grew up in the trees.
Right.
The trees grew around this place, but they were already there. Like you're selectively planting this cabin in the most beautiful place, selectively trimming and cleaning, and when it's done, it should look like it's been there.
Right. I like that way of looking at it. And it's funny, I can relate to that in probably an unlikely way, but it was when I worked in mineral exploration. I worked for a company with a buddy of mine where we would do everything by hand. We'd bring in no heavy equipment. We had a drill, but it was on tank treads, a small drill. And I'd cut all the roads by hand. I'd build corduroy roads to get this thing across swamps. And I'd use only, some standing dead, but mostly all down dead trees to build the corduroy roads. And then we wouldn't cut down any tree that was bigger than probably about 5 inches around. And we just worked that drill into the tightest little spots where people could walk past it and not even see it. And that was sort of also what this company specialized in, is very low impact. Because you could 10,000 places you could diamond drill and not one of them would end up actually being turning into a mine. So why kind of trash all these spots? And then I saw what some other companies were doing when we went to work in some of these places, and it's like full excavator, like boom, like bulldoze the whole bush, cut down the area the size of a huge parking lot, including like 100-year-old white pines, and put one small drill in the middle. It's like, why? Just so you could charge more, or you know what I mean? It was just sort of like, what's the point of doing that?
Yeah, it's just,
yeah. I saw that I've been to your one property in the UP. Did you end up building a cabin on that property? Remember when me and Ted and Heather?
Dave doesn't know this yet, but I bought a yurt.
Oh, cool. Wait a minute. Didn't I see that on YouTube already?
No.
No? Okay.
Nobody knows about this.
Okay. Nice.
So I'm kind of debating where to put it.
Yeah.
Because I just love yurts. Like it's just another structure that's like accessible.
This is going to be such a good segue for us,
this
by the
is
way,
just
into
like
Mongolia.
this is just like an interesting, like I am in love with structures and like how you can make a structure, again, fit into a landscape that feels not intrusive, that literally is nomadic, and, like the Mongols and like people who over every other culture, if they've lived in gurs or yurts, you cake it and you put it up and you can move it. Like it's such a movable structure.
Right. Yeah.
And they've just fascinated me. And I'm like, I got to have a yurt somewhere. So
nice.
I'm kind of thinking about putting it there. Yeah. That property is special. I also have a tree house in mind at that property.
Oh.
I have trees picked out. Like I have a tree vision there, a tree house vision.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Like a proper tree house, not like a tree fort, but
it would be tiny.
Yeah.
But you could big enough to sleep in and like have just a little space. But because it kind of goes out over a ridge, and it would be beautiful there.
That sounds really fun.
I don't know. I need
was
another
a big tree fort guy when I was a kid. I built like some epic. Me and my brother and my cousins built some like amazing tree forts with like staircases. We actually, me and my brother actually slept in a tree fort for a month straight once.
That's so awesome.
As kids that we built.
Oh my gosh, that's a great memory.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And we used to sleep in the thing all the time. We just basically had like 2x6s more or less we built it with, and then we managed to get our hands on some like expanding foam and roofing tar and some like random cuts of plywood and just slapped it on top of the 2x and just caulked anything that leaked and just slept in there.
That's how you do it.
Probably inhaled a lot of mosquito coil fumes to try to keep the bugs out because it wasn't all sealed. Yeah, no, it was totally. So I hope that I imagine yours would probably look a little bit better than that.
You never know.
So
I'm still a hack. I'm learning. I'm learning, and the building thing is just
Well, you show mistakes too, though, and I noticed that about Dave too, right? Everything you do is not perfect.
No.
Right. So you're not afraid to show the realities of making some mistakes when we build, because at the end of the day, who's perfect every time, right?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I am learning every day, and and you gain more confidence. You just want to try, like, what else can I try? What else can I build that'll push me? And it just takes me down a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Because I love it.
So I do too. I don't know. I just, when I build something, I haven't built as much as I want to, but I feel like I could just stare at it afterwards. You finish it and you just want to stare and you want to look at this part and look at that part. And like to the point where it's like, I don't want anyone to know how long I've been staring at this for, because it's like embarrassing.
Didn't we do awesome? Like, it's just kind of amazing that, I do that with structures all the time that I don't build. I'm like, wow, it makes me very aware of the work it takes to actually build, a dwelling. It is really humbling. Yeah. It's a lot of work and a lot of skill. Like,
awesome
it's
too.
interesting.
And we talked about cabin building. We've talked about real estate. We've talked about like real rural living, hacking out a homestead in the bush, raising a family there. But you also are somebody that knows how to live off the land. You know how to hunt as well. You know how to fish as well. You have some experience growing up doing deer hunting and more in Alaska too. And I just find it an interesting thing into how that sort of turned into going on the show alone, which was awesome because you're on the same season as me. How were you a fan of the show before? Were you watching it and thinking like, I want to try getting on the show? Or how did it happen when you all of a sudden were like, I want to get on, we got to try this out?
Dave and I were on just a little road trip in Alaska. We headed north up the Steese Highway, and you end up going up almost to the Yukon River. There's two towns, Circle and Central. One of them has a tiny little bar, Central. And we'd stopped in there. They have great burgers. It's like literally the only place to get like food for hundreds of miles. Went in there and they had a TV going. And even though it was muted, Alone season 1 was on. Oh, yeah. And we were eating a burger and I was just like,
what is this?
It's like, I got to know what's going on.
Yeah.
And so whenever, months later, I get internet and like find out about this show and then binge watch the first season. Like it was already done. I'm just like, oh my word, this is the coolest thing ever. Like, and then I told Dave, because he was still in Alaska at the time, he got back. I'm like, you have to see this show. And he thought the same thing. Like, oh, it'd be so cool to be on that. I'm like, yeah. And then you're like, well, who gets to try to be on the show? Yeah. And then we saw the casting call for family members. We're like, whoa, we could do it together. How amazing would that be? Yeah. And, that we apply and, you get the call and you go through boot camp and you get selected and you're just like, I'll do the Baird. Yeah. I need the T-shirt.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. My brother. I have he just made that T-shirt. I'm not involved.
Oh, that's
I wasn't
so
involved
awesome.
in it. I know. I would have.
And Dave said tweaks. The back should say no.
Yes. Yeah. My crowd trap.
But anyway, so that was amazing. Yeah. Right. That was epic.
I didn't even know. I applied, and they didn't even tell me that I was going to be on the show with 2 people. So they're like, maybe we'll do 2, maybe we're not. So they weren't even like telling me, which was kind of weird. So I didn't even apply for one with 2 people. I just answered some other casting call. Oh. Yeah, so I it was kind of sprung on us. So I don't know why, if I answered something or
I wonder if you had applied just for a solo run and they just saw you and plucked you for that.
I thought that's what I was doing, yeah. But then I showed them a reel with both me and my brother. I don't really know. It just seemed different than anybody else, but I was lucky to get on. I never took it as like that it was going to be an easy go. Like my brother's like, come on, Jim, don't you want to do this? I just gone across this Ungava Peninsula, 36 days solo. Thank you. And then me and Tori did a 2-week trip in northern Saskatchewan where it just rained the entire time. Seems to be a theme.
Right.
And I'm just thinking like, oh my God, now I'm going on alone again, like potentially the most like painful of all these things. And Ted's like, come on, man. I'm like, all right. So if it wasn't for Ted to give me that extra little push, I might not have done it.
Wow.
To be honest with you. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. But we just went ahead and did it.
You guys were the suffer kings. I mean, it really is just a suffer fest. Right. Amazing gift of an experience, right? But like, it's suffering. There's just, that's hard. Yeah.
Well, and then you turned around and you went on Alone season 5 in Mongolia. What was Mongolia like? Because that's a place that's always been sort of an interesting place to me because it is pretty wild. They have these nomadic herders. They live in yurts. You said a yurt or a gur?
So they call them gurs.
Gurs.
They're
Okay.
gurs in Mongolia.
Oh, okay.
I mean, they are what we would call a yurt, but they are called gurs. And if you call them a yurt there, they do not like that.
Oh, they don't like it.
They're gurs.
So where is it called a yurt? Anywhere? Or is that just like an English term for it?
Wherever it was first, is it maybe China? I really can't think.
Because I know people all through kind of some of those Silk Road countries.
Everywhere else is a yurt, but in Mongolia it's a gur.
Okay, cool. I didn't know that.
It was much like it very much felt like Montana.
No kidding.
Yeah, it was much more pleasant than the rainy Vancouver climate.
Yes.
That
was tough.
It was
hammering
super
rain.
tough.
Yeah.
So it was a much more arid place. They told us it's going to be really cold, and it just honestly was super hot for a long time, and like too hot for me to actually function.
Wow.
So I just kind of chased the shade all day, just laying in the shade, and
very different
because it's so hot for
on
me
Vancouver
personally.
Island. We were probably like running to the sun.
Yeah.
Please, sun.
Yeah, it was insane. But that turnaround was so incredibly tight. 9 months after is literally a bit much.
Yeah. So you
for me
came
to
off
take
of
in.
surviving for like you were out there for how
7 weeks.
7 weeks on Vancouver Island.
Yeah.
Then you turn around and you've lost all this weight. Your body's probably not even recovered.
And my mental state, I don't think
Mental
was
state
recovered.
not recovered.
But like, I'm not going to turn down Mongolia.
Right, I know. How do you
Like,
turn that down?
I'm not doing that. And I did feel super
and then you
bad.
still stayed for well over a month on
Almost a month.
Mongolia
It was
too.
28 days.
28 days.
Yeah.
Okay, so for a month we'll call it. We'll round it up.
But like, I felt so bad. Really, of the two of us, like it should have been Dave to have the second chance. They probably just needed another female, and I probably got
nobody
the call,
wants another
you know?
white male. Boring.
But he had to tap the first time because of me, because of my weight. So it's like I felt kind of bad, but like I'm not gonna say no.
Yeah,
because I want to go to Mongolia.
I feel like a respectable reason though to leave is because like you've lost weight.
Well, they
They're
were
probably
gonna
going
pull
to
me.
pull you.
They told
and
me they
how
were.
much damage do you want to do to your
Yeah.
body?
Yeah.
It's not because you like stubbed your toe. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like it's pretty. You've visibly dealt with a lot and suffered because you're leaving because you have to lose weight, right?
Yeah, I mean, and that was such a turning point when they showed up. I'll never forget that they came one day out of the blue because that's what they do anyway. But like, they came. It's kind of a funny story. They came on shore carrying a box, and it was like a white box. Dave's like, they brought us a pizza. And I'm like, no way. Because we're like, did we win? Like, are they bringing us a pizza?
Yeah.
And they get to shore, and he's like, what's up? Hey. And they're like, he's like, did you bring us a pizza? He's like, no, there's scales.
Oh,
And he's like, oh, you're going to weigh us? And he's like, we're going to weigh her. And we're like, oh. We had been there. We were like, we're here to win.
Yeah.
Nothing had faltered.
Right.
And then they came and weighed me.
Yeah.
And they didn't weigh him. And then, they leave and go, and you're like, oh, geez, what's going on,
Yeah.
And then they came back and they're like, so you guys need to change your strategy because, she's approaching a red line.
Yeah.
And we're
change
like,
my
change my strategy. So can you like airdrop some hamburgers or
You want-
something?
so just start manifesting food.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, let's try to eat the poisonous snails. So that's what we did next. And that didn't work out.
Did I tell you me and Ted ate a bunch of those poisonous snails? So
They tasted like bile.
we did the part that tasted like bile, we just cut that part out.
No.
Yeah. Yeah, it tasted like bile. So we're eating the snails and we're like, oh, this part tastes really yucky. And we're just like,
All of
we're
it
like,
did.
don't eat that part. We thought the
awful.
rest of it tasted buttery and delicious.
No.
Maybe there were different snails, but there was
gosh.
definitely
No,
a
I'm
strong
sure.
bile flavor to
was.
part of it. But yeah, we ate like tons of those things, and then afterwards we found out they're poisonous. But like there was just a part of it. See, you know how like a cat eats like a mouse and eats around the gallbladder, even like a fisher.
They'll like spit out the like.
Yeah, like a fisher
kidney or
won't eat the porcupine. One of the I don't know. I've seen a
Interesting.
porcupine completely eaten by a fisher, and
Except
you
the
see
one
like
thing.
one organ and just
It's
the skin.
So fascinating.
Yeah. So that Ted were just like that must have been what we did. I guess we didn't. We probably were lucky though.
Dude.
But who knows? Maybe Ted did get sick because by the end, he was like not
Gosh, you
feeling very
guys-
well.
Yeah, I was not feeling well. But I tell you what happened there. It completely rattled our confidence.
Yeah.
Like there was no break in the armor
Right.
until that mental break that they instilled in us.
You got to change your thing. Things aren't going well, right?
Yeah. Like what? Like, you don't see each other naked. You're
Uh-huh.
so freezing. You're never taking your clothes off. Like you don't know how skinny you are.
Right.
And when they're like, and so at that point, season 3 had already aired.
Yeah.
And well, it had already been shot.
Yeah.
And I said, have you ever had to pull somebody or like, do you remove people for?
Yeah.
And they're like, yes. Of course, we didn't know that because we hadn't seen season 3.
Right.
Hadn't aired yet. Yeah. And they left and it was just like a gut punch. It really rattled our mindset. And that's how it's so important about the mindset, right? Like we're there to win and now like they're saying I'm on a clock.
Yeah.
Right?
So you think it kind of hurt the cycle? Because so much of this is psychological.
It did.
If there's anything
It
that I
did.
learned.
I mean, it didn't change how hard we were trying to get food.
Yeah.
And I just want to tell the story real quick, but like was fishing on the rocks one day and nothing was biting and I was there alone. We weren't catching nothing was biting. We couldn't find anything to eat. And I'm on the edge of the rocks and this giant Pacific octopus starts crawling out of the rocks right underneath of me.
Whoa.
And you're like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? I got like 2 choices. I've got like a stick and I've got the one hook. Like, what do I choose?
Yeah.
And I should have gone for the hook, but I
Right.
went for the long stick. I'm like, if I can just get like under it and flip it up,
Right.
then I can like stab it or whatever. Like we're
Yeah.
going to eat some octopus.
Yeah.
And it was so incredible. Like I didn't get it on film because I think it was just enough over. Like I was running camera, but it was just like, oh shit, action, right?
Yeah.
And I hit that octopus underneath and trying to get it up. As soon as I touched it, it started fighting to go back in the water. So we're like fighting each other and
Wow.
it's squirting ink. And I'm like,
No
in the
kidding.
moment, I'm like, oh, this is amazing. Like in the moment, like, wow,
Yeah,
I can't
yeah.
believe this is happening.
Yeah.
But it was so strong. It's got more arms than I do. And
Right.
it's just like, and I was just like, whoa, that really
And you
just
lost the
happened.
battle.
And then I was like, I should have grabbed my hook because at least I would have had a hook in it to fight.
Right.
Hindsight, right? Like,
Yeah.
but there was just no food. And
Yeah.
even any little thing was making me feel ill just to eat like anything.
Yeah.
And I was just way too far gone. So 7 days passed and they would have come on the next check and pulled me. So we're like, we're just going to make the call.
Right.
We
Instead of
wanted to be
having
in
to,
charge of that call.
Yeah.
So
No, that's a wise decision, but maybe if you had more strength left, you would have won that fight with that octopus too.
But then we found out you guys ended up staying like 20 more days. We're like, oh, hell no.
Yeah.
That would not have worked out anyways.
It wasn't a super fun 20 days.
Oh
let me
my,
just tell you.
we just were in awe of you guys and your suffer fest.
Yeah.
Like it really, I mean, you get to that point and it is just, it's the mind and body endurance game. Like it is super, super hard. So we give you guys all kinds of credit. That was incredible what you pulled off.
I appreciate that. Yeah. When we, when you did Mongolia though, did you notice a big difference between being truly alone? Because on our season it was a little different because we started out separately and one of us had to do the hike, but then we were essentially surviving in pairs. Did you notice that being completely alone to be like way harder? Or because I always, I've done these trips like 36 days alone, and I've done some pretty big other solo trips too. And I haven't really found it to be horrible to be alone, although like I have a map and I have a plan. And I'm like, if I go this many miles a day, I will get here. And I'm falling behind. Well, I have X amount of food. I'm going to cut that in half. And then I could, right? Where alone, you don't have that, like, which I guess would be true of a real sort of castaway survival situation too. Did you notice a big difference?
I think the real gem of that show is the psychological play that happens with a person. Like, I like being alone. I like being on solo adventures. So the alone part did not like play. Like I wasn't like, oh man, I just, wish I wasn't here alone. Like I never had that thought. I really wanted to do it on my own and prove that side of myself to myself. Like the first time, what it is like you get that help with division of labor. It's so helpful. So when you're by yourself, now it's all on you. And but also you don't have to split your food. So like there's all kinds of like
you don't
things.
need as much wood because you don't have to cook twice as much food.
Right.
It's little
And
things
so
like
there's
that.
also someone else's energy and mood that can affect you. That now it's just you.
Yeah,
And
I
either
don't
that's
have
a
to
bonus or not.
waste all my energy screaming at my brother.
Right. So it's either a good thing to bring you up or it's a bad thing that will bring you down. So you're on your own there. So it wasn't that, but it was just the psychological damage, I think, from it being so close to when I did it before.
Oh,
it was
yeah.
just like, dude, and I tell you what, like, remember how we were all on the rocks? Like, they're flying over right before we launch.
Yeah, on season 4.
So season 5 is like all people that have done this before, and they're all like, okay, here they come, and you're like, yay,
no.
you're like, shit, here we go, because you know exactly what you're in for.
Yes.
You know what's
it's
ahead
going to
of
be
you.
suffering. And even
And
though
it was very sobering.
Was it the second one?
Oh yeah, there was tears and people are crying, and you're like, shit, here we go again. Like, you know what's coming.
Yeah, yeah.
It was a whole different vibe.
And I think that's something that is such an eye opener, because who really is ever going to go do that to practice, right? And I think even though everybody now had learned so much about what they did wrong, what they did right, what it's really all about, it doesn't mean that you could go out there and just manifest calories. You know what I mean? And I feel like that is like a misconception about survival, is that people think that if you're really good, you'll always find a way, but you are held down by the finite number of calories in your area. Absolutely. You know what I mean? And, I always thought that was something that I'm like, oh yeah. And then you get too weak. You can't exactly travel.
You can't travel at all.
Right. Yeah. You're restricted by the walls of your own weakness.
Physicality. Yeah.
But I did see Sam and Pete, who, did really well on our season 2.
Yeah.
But in that situation, you have Sam didn't catch any fish. The fisheries biologist and Pete caught all the fish. So if Sam wasn't there, I mean, I don't want to say like Sam dragged Pete down, but like
caught any fish.
On a pure calorie standpoint, Pete would have beat us, right? And then, it's so funny because we have this family friend who's, God bless her, she's very nice, but she's kind of like gets teased a bit because she's sort of like a prissy. I don't know if you're supposed to say that anymore, but she's like, she doesn't like camping and doesn't imagine and she drinks her wine with her finger like this, and she's amazing. But we're watching this, and so you have Sam in this blaze orange, and then Pete in this
green,
and then we're like, why isn't Sam catching anything? And she's like, well, I think it's because the fish just see him from his blaze orange, and we're like, bingo. Oh my God, you're absolutely right. That's gotta be it.
It makes sense.
Yeah, because remember how clear the water would get sometimes?
Yeah, and they're side by side. He's catching, he's not.
And what else could it be?
It's wild.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And he's wearing this olive green, which is backed by the green trees in his background, right? So
it makes complete sense.
Yeah, I think so. Anyways.
Mongolia, I was losing weight at a faster clip. The emotional, physical damage was still very fresh.
Right.
And I'm like, I kind of have nothing left to prove. And I'm sick of this green tarp. And, I think I said to the camera, I wish Dave would have been on that one just because of the weather and the setting. And it was every night I'd watch the sun go down the mountain, and it was beautiful sunsets, and it was dry. And, I'd have a fire every night, and it was just it's kind of, if I had food and friends, this would be a party.
Right.
And it's
Vancouver Island, not so much.
No. So I was just I'm just done.
Yeah.
I want to eat. I want to be around people.
Yeah.
And I had calculated, I'm I got about 4 more days till I'm at the weight I was when I got pulled. So, was going to go.
Yeah.
So I was losing weight a little faster.
Yeah.
So I'm good. And I left good. I left feeling good. And, both occasions left nothing on the table and didn't feel bad about leaving. And then I think you got to guard that. I remember Dave always saying, what you have to remember is as soon as you tap and you get that first meal in you, how are you going to feel about what you just did if you tapped right now? Are you going to go like, damn, I should still be there? You don't want that.
Right.
You don't want to go to that place you're not ready to go. Like, think about what you're going to feel like after that first meal and if you're going to regret.
And also, once you realize that you can't even really enjoy that first meal that you've been
you're
dreaming
so far
about.
away from enjoying that burger.
Yeah, you can't even enjoy. You get out, like, everyone's like, "What's the first thing you ate?" I'm like,
Broth.
3 grapes and
And
a piece of
cracker.
bread.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then after me and Ted
You guys were
got
wicked
out,
thin.
I was like pretty ripped, but I did not feel like an athletic specimen. I felt like I couldn't walk
Right.
up a flight of stairs.
I
right?
know, it's insane.
Yeah, and I just remember them. So then the production crew, because they just also missed Christmas and New Year's, and they were probably like, "Thank God this is over."
Right.
So somebody left us with some vegetable broth. And that's it. And me and Ted are like starving. We're
I
like,
know.
we were eating more food out there. We should have brought the gunnelfish
Oh my
that we left at
gosh,
the campsite. And
no.
we couldn't get a hold of the production team because they're having a party. And we're like
Dude.
starving. And Ted's just like so
Pizza.
mad. Yeah. And Heather's like, Ted, you just won. You should be happy. He's like, I'm just too like hangry that I've just been right. So
Yeah.
you think you're going to get out and like, I kept having these dreams of Reese's Pieces pancakes. I kept dreaming that I was moose hunting.
Isn't it funny?
I kept dreaming that I was just like arrowing giant moose out there. Yeah.
I had a donut dream. Like, I couldn't stop thinking about donuts, and I don't eat donuts, so whatever. But amazing experiences.
Yeah.
The mind game is real. Like, it was intense, and it's special.
Totally.
I'll always cherish everything about both of those experiences. Except how, you can always complain about the editing, but you're out of control. You don't have the control. The experience itself was amazing.
Yeah, but
And
there's
I know
so
what
much.
happened.
I feel like there's so much footage they have to try to
just can't.
make a story out of it,
Yeah.
and it's like, they have to kind of stay on one story that isn't really your whole experience.
Yeah, not even close.
That's a nice
or
way to
whatever.
put it,
Yeah,
anyways.
So but it was great. I'm glad I had the experience.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, are you still spending like your son's in Alaska right now, right?
Yeah.
Are you still going and spending summers or certain part of your time in Alaska?
Yeah, for sure. I cut logs last year to build a log cabin.
Okay.
So that is just like another project I'd like to try to tackle alone. So I cut the logs, and they're drying in a pile.
Okay. What
And
kind of
so,
logs?
Black and white spruce.
Okay. All right.
'Cause,
I think black and white spruce. Oh, that's fairly light, but then I'm like, oh no, it's way denser there. It's lighter here, but there's the growth rings are so tight.
It's very tight.
Yes. Yeah. Like your R value of a spruce tree is in Alaska is about the same as a birch tree down here.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Just how much I don't know if R value is the right word or BTUs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know what you mean. So we had that stand of trees on that property. I'm like, if I'm ever gonna try this is the property. These are the trees.
Yeah.
They're really densely packed. It's not good for the forest anyway.
Yeah.
So that was an adventure. Doing that last year. So I'd like to finish that.
Would you build it and sell the property? Would you
No.
keep it? You
Nah.
keep it.
Oh,
You couldn't
yeah.
build this cabin.
Oh my gosh,
and-
no, I could never.
Yeah. Oh man.
So
that's-
I'm clearing a spot on the ridge, and it's not anywhere near where the logs are drying, and so I have a lot to figure out.
Yeah.
But it's like with building, it's taught me, and everything else in my life has taught me, like, just freaking go for it, and don't think about the end. Think about the next thing.
Yeah.
What's next? Not what do I have? Like the whole thing, and that is just like, okay. The first thing I needed to figure out was, are these logs ready to be peeled? Like, so is the sap still running enough that I can get the bark off the log? So once I figured that out, it's like, okay, yep, I'm in my window. Now let's start dropping trees. And it's like, okay, now
Okay.
keep going.
I saw
And-
some
and
of this
so-
video. Yeah.
And so I'm just like carving a circle path of cutting my logs and like trying to, and it's just fun.
I don't know it must be very empowering to know that you can start a project like that and finish it, because as much as I have that, desire or want to know and how to build a log cabin in the woods, I'd be worried that like I'd start to into it. I'd be like, this is too hard. It's too repetitive. One log after another. And I just wouldn't like finish, and I'd just blow it and quit. You know, deep down, my deepest secret concerns are that, you know. Have you ever been concerned that I'm going to start this project? Is this, and I know people too. We have friends that, you know, lived in a wall tent right in this area and slowly built this gorgeous post and beam house, did all the joinery and everything. Wow. And eventually they're just like, you know, and they're a little older than us too. And they're just like, we bit off more than we could chew. Oh my God. And, you know, they eventually finish it, but they were sort of like, done at a point, right? You know, have you ever been concerned that you're going to start something that you're not going to be able to finish?
No.
Well, that must be nice. Yeah.
No, I get a little
little
obsessive. I literally can't sleep. I can't focus until I'm done. Like, it's awful, kind of.
Oh, really? So you just go. So at one point, was it ever like that?
I have a hard time stopping.
Oh, okay.
I have the opposite problem. And I'm ready to start something in the middle of the thing I'm still working on.
Oh, yeah.
And so
I
get
a lot of projects going on.
Yeah, I
as
get
well.
I get a lot going.
Yeah,
So.
yeah.
But I always tell Dave, I'm like, because he's like, yeah, you do it to yourself. You know, you're filling up your schedule and your time. So I'm like, I don't ever sit down, which is true.
Yeah.
But I do it to myself, and it's not like I want to sit down. It's just like I have this energy in it, and I go, but I finish what I start. And he's like, nah, you do.
Good for, good for you. How do you think you have so much energy? Is it just physical fitness? Is it just your excitement? Is it a choice? Where do you find the energy?
I just think, pack it in, man. You got this one life, and like I don't want to think about things I coulda, woulda, shoulda done.
Right.
And I don't want anything. I don't want to have any excuses.
Yeah.
And if you know, we're all being honest, you're all getting older, and I'm trying to fight, you know, and stay in shape as much as I can, and I just want to pack it in, see what I can achieve. And, you know, the older you get, it's almost like a challenge of like, well, what is the ceiling on when you could or shouldn't or can't do things? And like, my body's going to tell me, but I'm going to be fighting it the whole way. Like, I don't know. It's just this, I feel like a little kid inside all the time. Like, I just don't feel like I'm ready to stop.
Yeah. Well, you know, I get that. That's what I get from watching your stuff and from talking to you. And your whole, your slogan and the message you tell people is get outside and get happy. And, you know, I sometimes feel that I'm somebody in maybe with different things, but I feel I do pack a lot and I have this going. I'm like, we're going to start a podcast and we're going to go spend 5 weeks in the Yukon and we're going to drive across Canada and paddle into Alaska, and I'm going to solo the Hood River and across the Barren Grounds after.
I heard your schedule this year and I'm like, dude.
Yeah. Well, you know, and so I'm excited. I want to do it all because I don't want to regret. And watching some of your content and Dave's or just hearing your story, I'm like, man, I wish I had the guts to go to Alaska when I was 22.
You do all kinds of stuff. Oh my gosh.
Yes, you can't. A wise person once said, Jim, you can do anything you want to do, but you can't do everything you want to do. Sometimes when I'm engaging, you know, with you and Dave or watching your content, one of the things that I realize that inspires me about it is that you kind of get sometimes caught in this minutia when you're trying to live this like life with no regrets, but you got to remember to stop and be so thankful for your life.
Yeah. Oh,
and I feel
so
like
thankful.
That's what you are expressing, that you that essence of what you do is express it, that absolute thankfulness and bliss that you get to have this experience and how important and special your life is. And that's what I get, what I'm reminded of, to remind myself of, I think, when I watch your content. So I think a lot of that feeling kind of is encapsulated in your saying, which is get outside and get happy. Can you unpack what that means a little bit?
I know when I go outside, the feeling I get of just being away and rejuvenated and, you know, stress-free and just, I don't know. I've always had that pull to just go outside, and it just makes sense that it would evoke that kind of a feeling. And as a filmmaker, you know, I really love pulling elements of all your senses into the video.
Yeah.
And it's an artwork all of itself, along with, the land and the building. And like, it just evokes such a feeling for me. And I just hope that comes through for people that watch and inspires them to get outside and feel those feelings. It's just so powerful. And you get it. You know,
I totally
what
get
it's
it.
like.
And sometimes you're like, here, try some of this. Can you smell it? Like you hold the steak up to the camera, like smell this.
Everybody gets a first bite.
Yeah. So you have the first bite. Yeah. And that's like, you kind of feel like, I think I can smell that a little bit. Yeah. No, I totally get outside and get happy. And I think that there's something to about nature that is obviously uplifting, and there's something about exercise and hard work.
Absolutely.
And when that, even if you're in a bunker underground, exercise is going to make you feel good, and nature makes you feel good. And when you combine hard work and nature to work on solving a problem that is tangible, that you can touch and see when you finish it, those three things connecting together is like, it's probably just what we're supposed to be doing as a species.
Yeah, it's so powerful, and confidence building, the more you do and the more you can be outside and doing that, you just get this confidence.
Yeah.
And the forest is just ready to give you all kinds of wonderful feelings.
Yeah.
That just are rejuvenating and calming and comforting, and like just it's this peace, I've always felt that. Yeah. God's creation is just super powerful.
Preaching to the choir with me anyways. Yeah, absolutely. And, as somebody that is been so immersed and built this unique lifestyle, what I would consider a unique lifestyle. It's not the norm, but it's one that a lot of people dream of doing. For people of, I guess, young people, but really people of any age that are looking at maybe taking that first step and wanting to maybe buy a remote property, or maybe don't have a lot of experience building things, but want to try, or have a dream to try building a cabin. Is there any advice that you could give to them on how they might be able to do that, especially maybe if somebody doesn't have a ton of money or not? What could you share that might help somebody take that first step?
Well, first of all, we're all capable of so much more than we believe about ourselves. So getting past like the idea of needing permission, you have permission to go chase the things that you think are out of reach, because really the reality is we're so much more capable than we all think we are. So especially, I think people have limiting beliefs about what they can do, what they're ever going to do. Like they just put, periods on things that should have ... in their life. And you got to like open up to the possibility of what is possible in your life. First of all, like I think it's a mindset thing, but also like be realistic about what you can afford. First thing I would say is get out of debt. Like get rid of the things you don't need in your life. Be really honest about your lifestyle. And if you really want something, you have to make sacrifices. So first of all, like getting out of debt is just a huge piece of advice. And then being realistic about finding that perfect piece of land, because it really doesn't exist unless you're a millionaire. Like you need to be willing to say, what do I actually is a must-have, and what is just a want to have, as far as the perfect piece of land. So if you're just starting out, you might be like Dave and I, like we had no money, $6,000, $7,000, $10,000, $20,000, whatever you have. That's where you need to look at that market. Like, don't start looking at $100,000 properties that have, and you've got to have riverfront, or you've got to XYZ. You really have to be honest about what you can afford if you want to do it actually the hard way, but it will be the more satisfying way. If you ask me, doing everything out of pocket is just, and that also forces you to have to learn skills that you think you maybe don't have, or aren't ready to learn, but really it forces you into that lane. And that just makes you grow, and makes that sweat equity grow, and just makes you grow as a person. And I think that is just, starting with realistic expectations of, You can't start with a mansion. You can't start
Right.
with, riverfront property or lakefront
Be
property.
happy that at least you have a property. Maybe if it's not
Yes.
perfect, you can
Yes,
find
and
something.
look for the pieces that have been looked over and the pieces that need a little love. Maybe they need the love from you and your vision, and you can really take a turd and polish it. You really can.
Yeah.
And it's just
Yeah.
some of that, and just get out and experience life. Don't wait. Like, I would say, do not wait.
Yeah.
Don't say I'm not in shape, or I'm too old, or I'm too young, or I don't have enough money. What I mean, it really is
It's
true.
a good way to get in shape doing this kind of stuff
Absolutely.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that. And, looking back at myself and basically starting to become a professional adventurer, which is
Right.
something that's not even a thing. And that's
Right.
like laughable. If I
You
had
made it
actually,
happen.
I thank God. But if I honestly, just listening to what you're saying, if I had actually had the money, I might have failed because I would have spent
Right.
it in the wrong places. But when I don't have it, you're forced to be super resourceful and not throw
Yes.
money here and throw money and all of a sudden say, oh my God, I don't have any. So in a way, it was like, I don't know if I would have really done better if I did have more,
There's nothing more motivating than hunger.
Yeah.
And I mean that from a physical and a literal, like metaphorical, like, how hungry are you to eat? You're going to make time for the things that are important in your life. It's up to you to decide, and you can decide to make excuses. You can decide to take action. It's really that simple. It's not complicated. You just start. You just do. You get to it. It's really how I've operated my life. Like, I don't know how to do it. Let's go.
Yeah.
I don't know how to build a log cabin. I'm building one.
Right.
One log at a time. One problem at a time. One spike at a time. One step at a time. 1 foot of the land at a time. Like, I don't know. I'm figuring it out. That's the essence.
I like that you're sharing that because I think a lot of people, they think if I'm going to be a content creator, if I'm going to even start something, regardless, that you need to have this higher level of knowledge at it, or that people think, oh, no, I don't know what I'm doing or something like that. But I think it's inspiring to hear somebody say, hey, I'm just going to get out there and start doing it. And I encourage others to do it too.
Yeah, you literally won't know if you can do it unless you start. That is the hardest part. And you got to know it's not going to come fast. I didn't learn how to build overnight. I didn't learn how to be a content creator overnight or a filmmaker. It's just that hunger of wanting to do better. And really, you can't quit.
Yeah.
That's really the other thing, is you just can't quit. I remember starting my YouTube channel. I have squirrel brain bad. And I did not start YouTube to make money. I started YouTube because I love the art of filmmaking and I wanted to share experiences. But I said to myself, Brooke, if you start this, you will not quit. It's the longest job I've ever had.
Yeah.
I made a commitment to myself and this craft. I would not quit. And it didn't pay for years.
Yeah.
Probably till year 5.
Yeah. Wow.
5 years of hundreds of videos, hundreds and thousands of hours of effort.
Wow.
Don't stop.
Yeah, and do you think that because you had that attitude, but because also you're filming things that you're passionate about, that made it possible to actually put in the extra work? Like if you're filming something that you thought might be a better market to do, but that you weren't passionate about, would you have been able to put in that kind of time?
No, people can smell authenticity and like smell your real motivation. And also that feedback you get when you are really helping people and inspiring people. I mean, that's just so motivating.
Yeah.
That's a gift all by itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for an awesome chat today, Brooke. I really appreciate your time, and I really appreciate you making it here to come on the show. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks, Jim, so much.
Right on. All right. We did it. Awesome.